Part 15 of the Blue Review, Volume 1, Issue Number 2, edited by John Middleton Murry. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Music by W. Denis Browne. Ferrari, Henschel, Fanelli. One of our habits in England is to produce foreign works with a flourish of trumpets, a dozen years or so after their first appearance abroad, by which time their vitality is generally exhausted and their novelty gone. It was really hardly worth Mr. Fagg's while to disinter the Vita Nuova for the sake of saying first performance in England. Ferrari is not a great composer, and never will be. He tries to graft German methods onto an Italian temperament, and the result is a confusion of style. The Vita Nuova is really nothing more than a student's work, regarded as a setting of a poem that is as familiar to most Italians as the Lord's Prayer is to us. It naturally loses much of its effect when sung to a translation, and as it was done the other day, all the intimacy of the original vanished. Chorus and orchestra ploughed through it in strict time, without any of the rubato that the composer goes out of his way to demand in a note at the beginning of the score. The tendency of the music is naturally towards frequent accelerandos and crescendos. He has accordingly contented himself with purely negative indications of diminuendo and ritenuto. Mr. Fagg's Procrustean beat, however, never once allowed the music to play itself, and the naive melodies and simple orchestration, which, treated gently, would have been quite effective, sounded simply stiff and affected. Another semi-new arrival was Dr. Henschel's Requiem. It was very well performed by the Handel Society. The soloists were quite admirable, and the chorus and orchestra, mainly amateur, quite excellent. I mention the soloists first, because it is of them that Dr. Henschel seems to have thought most when he was writing it. The four solo parts melt into one another with delicious intricacy. If anything is to be said against the work, perhaps the writing is a little too elaborate and consciously beautiful. The blending is not so noticeable in the chorus writing. The joins here are sometimes perceptible, and there are gaps just in the places where continuity is most needed. There are, besides, far too many climaxes of sound. They average about one to a page. But there is a great deal of beauty everywhere, and sincerity too. Dr. Henschel writes strong and musical counterpoint. He has a vivid sense of tonality, and that power that Schubert had of momentarily disturbing harmonies without shifting the key centre. Above all, he has the gift of writing long tunes. He could not, of course, help being influenced by other writers of requiems, but he has kept his own individuality in spite of them. Mozart and Brahms can be traced in his mental attitude towards the text, and Wagner in his musical treatment of it, but not one of them really obscures his personality in a single bar. The performance of Fanelli's Tableau Symphonique by the Cologne Orchestra of Paris was unsuccessful for much the same reason as the Vita Nuova, except that Fanelli was much more in advance of his period, the 80s, than Ferrari is, or ever could be in advance of his. Monsieur Pienet's discovery has come too late to do either us or Fanelli any good. There are a number of curious anticipations of modern colour in the three pieces, but they are too shapeless to be effective. There is undeniable atmosphere in them all, particularly in the third piece, the insistence of which becomes almost maddening after a time. Fanelli might have been a great genius if he could have heard his compositions played when he was younger, but years of privation and neglect have let his ideas run to seed and left his technique sprawling. Among the excitement of all these discoveries, an ostentatious revival has been quietly going on elsewhere. The Carl Rosa Company have been performing Mozart's Magic Flute in English at the Coronet Theatre. It was a modest performance, but none the less interesting for that, and is likely to do the cause of opera far more real good than 60 Covent Gardens. But I suppose the latter institution will go on thrusting ricordi operas and rubbish like Aubert Chabert down our throats until the day of judgment. End of part 15.